Thank you. لن نرى.
We will not leave. We will not leave. We will not leave. Palestine is our homeland. It is the land of our fathers, our grandfathers. It will remain ours. And if anyone were to leave, it would be the occupying usurpers. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Mr. Philemon Yang, President of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, heads and members of delegations, esteemed guests, peace and God's blessings be upon you all. I come to you today as my people, and for almost a year now, are subjected to one of the most heinous crimes of our era. It is a crime of a full-scale war, of genocide, that Israel is perpetrating. Israel, the occupying state. A crime that so far has killed more than 40,000 martyrs in Gaza alone, and thousands remain under the rubble. A crime that has injured more than 100,000 others to this day, and matters are getting worse. Hundreds of Palestinian families have been annihilated. Entire family names have been wiped out of the civil record. More than 100 families have been completely wiped out of the civil record. They no longer exist. Thousands have died because of the spread of disease and epidemics and the shortages in medicine and water. Moreover, more than 2 million Palestinians in Gaza have left their homes multiple times in search of safety and fleeing the systemic operations that the Israeli occupying army is perpetrating. And as this war of aggression continues, dozens are being killed every day, and double that amount is being injured amongst our bereft people in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank and in Jerusalem. I'm not here to respond to the lies of the Israeli Prime Minister, lies that he said in his speech before the U.S. Congress in July, where he claimed that his army does not kill innocent civilians in Gaza. I ask you by God, who is it then that killed more than 15,000 children of the 40,000, and an equal number of women and elderly persons from our people? And who is it then that is continuing to kill them? I ask you to answer me by God. Stop this crime. Stop it now. Stop killing children and women. Stop the genocide. Stop sending weapons to Israel. This madness cannot continue. The entire world is responsible for what is happening to our people in Gaza and the West Bank. The West Bank that is under a daily and continuous Israeli aggression. It is under a vicious settlement activity. They're building everywhere in Palestine, as if all of Palestine is theirs. It is subjected to the terrorism of gangs of settlers under the patronage and support of the Israeli government and the occupying army, which destroys hundreds of houses in the lands of Palestine, not to mention what our eternal capital, Al-Quds, is being subjected to in terms of campaigns to change its nature, to Judaize it, and to aggress it and its holy sites and landmarks, to change its historic and legal status. We've recently heard a terrorist Israeli minister calling for building a temple in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We must condemn and stop this reckless minister and those like him who want to set fire, a fire of religious conflict and strife that will burn everything in its way. The Aqsa Mosque and its surroundings, ladies and gentlemen, is the exclusive property of Muslims. This has been endorsed by a resolution taken by the League of Nations in 1930. This was a resolution by the League of Nations, and we will accept nothing else regardless of the circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, we have repeatedly warned here in the General Assembly that the situation in the occupied land of the State of Palestine warns of an explosion, and this explosion has happened. It happened on October 7th of last year and afterwards. And from the very first day, I stressed the need to immediately stop the war. I condemned the killing of civilians regardless of who they are and regardless of what side they were on or any people they were from. I demanded the release of prisoners and those detained by both sides. There is no need to detain women, children, and the elderly. We've said this repeatedly. To anyone who has those people detained, I called for immediately going to the negotiations table to implement a two-state solution based on international resolutions. But instead of heeding the voice of reason, the Israeli government took advantage of what happened to launch an all-out war of genocide against Gaza. It committed and continues to commit war crimes as acknowledged by the international community. They're called war crimes. Israel today is now launching a new aggression on the brotherly Lebanese people. The Lebanese people are now being subjected to a war of genocide. And Israel must stop the war in Lebanon and in Palestine. We condemn this aggression and we demand that it stops immediately. Israel has reoccupied the Gaza Strip in its entirety, and it has destroyed it almost entirely, so that Gaza is no longer fit for life. Most homes have been destroyed. The same applies to most buildings, health facilities, educational facilities, economic buildings, roads, churches, mosques, water plants, electric plants, and sanitation plants. Anybody who goes to Gaza who'd known it before would not recognize it anymore. It's no longer there. 75% of everything in Gaza has been fully destroyed. If Israel thinks that it would get away from being held accountable and punished for these crimes, then it is delusional. The international community must immediately impose sanctions on Israel. The massacres, the crimes, the genocide that Israel has been perpetrating against our people since its inception in 1948 to this very day will not go unpunished. There is no statute of limitations. Rights will never be lost as long as there are those who demand them. And despite our repeated calls and demands, the world has not succeeded in obliging Israel, this transient state, to stop this war of genocide and its war crimes against innocent civilian residents. We regret that the U.S. administration, the democracy of the world, the largest democracy in the world, obstructed 3 times draft resolutions in the Security Council demanding Israel to observe a ceasefire. The U.S. alone stood and said, no, the fighting is going to continue. It did this by using the veto. And added to that, it furnished Israel with the deadly weapons that it used to kill thousands of innocent civilians, children and women. And this further encouraged Israel to continue its aggression. As long as the U.S. is supporting it, then why not keep going, since it's already an aggressing state? This is the United States, the very country that was the only member in the Security Council that voted against granting the State of Palestine full membership in the UN. We don't deserve membership in the eyes of America, so they use the veto against it. I don't understand how the United States could insist on opposing our people, insist on depriving us of our legitimate rights to freedom and independence, as is the right of the rest of the countries, 194 countries, and we are no less than them. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel, which refuses to implement United Nations resolutions, does not deserve to be a member in this international organization. Israel, whose permanent representative in this organization says that the very building of the United Nations, and he said that this building must be removed. This building that we are sitting in right now, it must be wiped off the face of the earth. This country does not deserve to be a member in this organization. It is, from the very beginning, it has from the very beginning not fulfilled the conditions for membership. Because in 1949, when it submitted its membership application to the UN imposed two conditions. First, to accept and implement Resolution 181 and Resolution 194. Without implementing these two conditions, you will not be granted membership in the United Nations. Moshe Sharet, the foreign minister at the time, wrote a pledge. You will see it. A pledge, a written pledge, that he and Israel are committed to the implementation of those resolutions. And since 1949 to this very day, nothing has happened. We are going to submit a request, an application to the General Assembly on this matter. And as I said, if you return, then we will return. If they do not step back, then we will do more. I take this opportunity to commend the member states of the United Nations that voted with more than a two-thirds majority in favor of the draft resolution submitted by the State of Palestine, supported by a large number of friendly and sisterly countries, to adopt the ICJ's historic advisory opinion issued on the 19th of July 2024 to end the illegal Israeli occupation of the State of Palestine in a period of 12 months. For the very first time, there is a specific time frame. We demand the implementation of this particular requirement, including an immediate cessation of annexation and settlement activities, dismantling of existing settlements, and evacuating settlers from Palestinian territories. There's 600,000 settlers, and they're living on our land. Why don't they go back to their homes? We must give reparations to Palestinians and for damages that were a result of the unlawful policies and the practices of the occupation, and many other such issues that were mentioned in the ICJ's advisory opinion. We want what the ICJ stated and what the entire world accepted in the General Assembly with a vast majority that far exceeds a two-thirds majority. And Israel must be made to implement it. We rely on this resolution, which is the embodiment of international will and the principles of international law and the mechanisms that were adopted in this regard to guarantee implementation. We hope that this resolution would be implemented. Of the 1,000 resolutions taken on the Palestinian people since 1948 until this very day, and not a single one has been implemented yet. Ladies and gentlemen, today I feel very grateful as well, as I see this large, great shift in the positions of member states in the United Nations as they support Palestinians' rights to an independent state that is recognized and that deserves full membership in this organization, as is the case with the rest of the countries in the world that love freedom and peace. In the name of the Palestinian people, I thank you for this support. I thank you for your support of what is right, of justice, to achieve peace in our region. I call upon you to apply the laws of international law according to responsibilities and sovereignty. We don't ask you for more than you can do. We ask every state to give us our support within the realm of its responsibility and sovereignty. I also express our gratitude and appreciation for the demonstrations that spoke against the genocide in Gaza and that supported Palestinian rights that have been taking place throughout the world, including the American people. And I acknowledge the American people are marching in the streets in these demonstrations, and we are grateful to them. We appreciate what is happening in European countries and the noble supporters that come to Palestine, risking their lives as Israelis attack them. And here, I would like to make special mention of the Turkish-American martyr Aisha Noor, killed by the occupation army in cold blood. I say to those, the Palestinian people will not forget your honorable stand. We will remember you proudly when the occupation is eliminated and when our people enjoy freedom and independence. Ladies and gentlemen, recently there was much talk about the next day, the day after. What shall we do on the day after? What is our policy for the day after? And I say to you, the day after the end of the war in the Gaza Strip, I take this opportunity today to give you our view of what is needed immediately and on the day after the war ends. This is our proposal. We propose it to you. You can accept it, you can change it, you can amend it. We are ready for all that. First of all, a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the military aggressions and attacks by terrorist settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Second, humanitarian aid must be delivered urgently in an organized manner and in sufficient quantities, because there's nothing in Gaza, and they need everything. This humanitarian aid must be delivered throughout Gaza. Third, a full Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. We refuse the establishment of buffer zones or taking any part from Gaza. Gaza is only 7 kilometers by 40, and Israel wants to cut it up. It wants a piece here and a piece there, and we will not allow a single centimeter of Gaza to be taken. We demand that we stop the forced displacement inside the Gaza Strip or outside the Gaza Strip. We demand the return of those displaced to their homes or to have housing provided to them. Netanyahu wants in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip people to be displaced, to be evacuated to Egypt and to Jordan. We refused. The Jordanian and Egyptian governments, and I thank them for this, said we will not allow the displacement of any Palestinians and eviction of the Palestinians from their lands. Fourth, we demand the protection of UNRWA and humanitarian organizations from Israel's actions and to provide political and financial support to these organizations so that they can perform their role and offer their services to the Palestinian refugees until they return home. UNRWA was established to do its job until the refugees return. And every day Israel finds an excuse to convince others that UNRWA's work must be ended. Fifth, we demand international protection for the Palestinians on the lands of their occupied land. We want protection. We are not fighting Israel. We cannot fight Israel. And we don't want to fight. But we want protection. We want our children, our women, our families to be protected internationally. Sixth, Palestine, the state of Palestine must shoulder its responsibilities in the Gaza Strip and impose its full mandate on it and jurisdiction on it, including the border checkpoints, especially the Rafah international border between Egypt and Palestine, as part of a comprehensive plan. This has existed before, and it must return to the way it was. Seventh, and within the context of a comprehensive national reform process. This is a process that we're undertaking, and most countries have reviewed it, supported it, confirmed it, and thanked the Palestinian government for it. And hopefully we will continue with this process till the very end. In terms of this process, we will reconstruct our infrastructure and state institutions destroyed by Israel. We will revive the economy and establish sustainable development and rebuild the Gaza Strip. And we will hold the state of Israel fully responsible. Eighth, the authority of the state of Palestine and the Palestinian government and the PLO, the legitimate and sole representative of the Palestinian people, will have authority on all Palestinian territories in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and Eastern Jerusalem, as has been stipulated for us by international law. We are not asking for more, but we will not accept any less. The West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and the Eastern Jerusalem. We will not ask for more, but we will not accept any less. We will hold general elections. We're ready to hold the elections. We've been ready in the past, but Israel refused to allow us to hold these elections in Jerusalem. But if this were to happen, we're ready to hold these elections and to form a Palestinian government in accordance with the results of these elections. Ninth, we will continue to mobilize the largest possible international support so that the state of Palestine can achieve full membership in the United Nations as soon as possible. What do we lack? To be sitting amongst you. What do we lack? To be on the same footing as 194 official member states in the United Nations. We have the land, we have the authority, we have the people, we have the culture, we have the knowledge, we have everything that we need. We ask you to help us. 10th, the full implementation of the General Assembly resolution on the advisory opinion that we mentioned, issued by the International Court of Justice in a manner that would lead to the end of the occupation in 12 months, as stipulated by the resolution, as set by the advisory opinion. Number 11, hold an international peace conference under the auspices of the United Nations within a year to apply the two-state solution. So we hold this international conference so that we would resolve all the problems that remain between us and Israel. By the way, we recognize the state of Israel, but Israel doesn't recognize us. We want a solution that would protect both countries, the state of Palestine and the state of Israel, so that they can coexist in peace, stability, and security. Number 12, to adopt international peacekeeping forces by virtue of a Security Council resolution between the states of Palestine and Israel to guarantee the security of both countries. We call for guaranteeing the security of both countries. These are the elements of our vision for the day after, for today and for the day after the war ends in the state of Palestine in general. And I call upon you to adopt this plan and to provide all the necessary means to guarantee its success. Ladies and gentlemen, a few weeks ago, I declared that I've decided to lead a Palestinian delegation to the Gaza Strip so that we can stand by our people who have been exhausted by the Israeli genocide war. I call upon you to support this decision by issuing a United Nations resolution by the United Nations here, by pressuring the occupying government so that it would not obstruct this effort. And here I welcome any state, any party that wants to join us in this visit. We'll be happy to go with you to Gaza so that we could all see the tragedies that are taking place. I salute our heroic people that are sacrificing all that is precious for Palestine, in the Gaza of sacrifice, in the West Bank of solidarity, of Al-Quds, which is our crown jewel and our capital. We salute our people in the diaspora, in the refugee camps, to our brave prisoners in Israeli prisons. 6,000 prisoners. Israel arrests whoever it wants. Those prisoners whose dignity is being violated every day. Palestine will be free. It will be free despite anyone who objects to that. Our people will live on the land of their fathers and grandfathers as they have done for more than 6,000 years. They will continue their legitimate struggle for independence. The occupation will end, will end, will end. God's and peace blessings be upon you.
En nombre de la Asamblea.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the State of Palestine. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Mr. Adama Barrow, President of the Republic of the Gambia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
President of the 79th session of the UN General Assembly, Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres, Your Majesties and Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Heads of Delegation, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for the Gambia to participate in the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly and to engage in meaningful dialogue with global leaders and partners on the vision of shaping a more prosperous future for humankind. Your Excellency, Mr. President, allow me to express my heartfelt congratulations to you on your assuming the role of President for the 79th session. I similarly wish to register sincere gratitude to His Excellency Ambassador Denis Francis for his exemplary leadership and accomplishments during the 78th session. Mr. President, as we undertake to chart the future we envision, we welcome the initiative presented by Secretary General Guterres at the summit of the future under the theme Multilateral Solutions for a better tomorrow. My delegation firmly believes that the path to a better tomorrow lies in multilateralism and closer international cooperation. Through our collective responsibility and inclusive participation, we can decisively confront and overcome our challenges and bottlenecks. The high-level summit of the future has determined that human actions are largely responsible for the challenges we face today. Therefore, it is within our power to ably address the disasters that continuously trouble our nations. To succeed, however, the international community must recommit to implementing the resolutions of the Summit of the Future to tackle such critical global challenges as climate change, poverty, transitional crimes, and conflict. These incidents underscore the urgent need for comprehensive reforms within the United Nations system, particularly the UN Security Council and the international financial institutions. We must equally strive for a more representative, just and inclusive United Nations to shape the world we so dearly want. Mr. President, the Gambia's perspective on the theme, leaving no one behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for present and future generations, aligns closely with the principles and aspirations of Agenda 2030 for sustainable development. In accordance with the principles of the United Nations Charter, the theme serves as a crucial reminder to the international community of the need for solidarity and renewed commitment. With specific reference to the Gambia, the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, is central to our national agenda. And we are committed to ensuring that our development efforts are both sustainable and impactful. Like many least developed countries, LDCs, the Gambia faces huge challenges that pose serious threats to our survival as a nation, hence requiring collective international efforts to resolve. Consequently, the global community needs to assist the least developed countries, especially to address the burden of inequality, build more robust economies, and create policy space for economic growth. To tackle the debt burden and internal state weaknesses, we need to increase investment in capacity building. Also, we must jointly endeavor to bridge the digital divide and support technology transfer to advance development. Mr. President, we live in a world with widening inequalities, thus suppressing the weak and making the conditions of the poor worse, grossly violates the expressed ideals and spirit of the Summit of the Future. The Gambia is fully committed to the global call for gender equality and recognizes the indispensable role women play in socio-economic development. We firmly believe that empowering women translates into community empowerment and ultimately inclusive development. For these reasons, my government places great emphasis on women's rights, and we are dedicated to protecting and empowering women. As President, I will continue to ensure that women and girls are protected and given the necessary space to contribute meaningfully to our national development agenda. On youth matters, at the recent consultative summit, stakeholders recommended a sharper focus on innovation and climate change, gender equity, bridging the digital divide, and global governance that promotes youth empowerment through employment, education, and health. The summit's recommendations will inform endeavors to fill policy gaps and expand funding opportunities for better youth engagement. Furthermore, my government commits to aligning our national priorities with global benchmarks and in partnership with youth-led organizations and other stakeholders. We also resolve to use transformative solutions to create greater opportunities for all. Mr. President, the Gambia believes in collective international efforts to combat global challenges. Based on this, last year, the Gambia joined the international community by co-sponsoring UN General Assembly Consensus Resolution 77/276, which sought to engage the International Court of Justice, ICJ, on the obligations of states regarding climate change. Last August, the Gambia submitted its written statement to the ICJ, and we look forward to participating in the oral hearings later this year in The Hague. At the national level, the Gambia remains steadfast in its commitment to promoting human rights and establishing a vibrant democratic environment. The establishment of a National Human Rights Commission and entrenchment of a free, independent, and impartial judiciary provide a solid framework and a sense of security for our citizens, thus ensuring they have a place to seek redress for injustice. I am happy to report that since 2017, the Gambia has neither recorded a single political prisoner, nor has any journalist or human rights activist been jailed in the Gambia. Proudly too, in August 2024, the Gambia was recognized as one of Africa's leading defenders of freedom of expression and ranked third in Article 19's Global Expression Report 2024. We will continue striving to better our situation. Mr. President, as committed advocates of peace and security, respect for basic rights and freedoms, and the application of international law, we stand firmly against injustice, no matter where it occurs. No doubt, as a nation of peace, guided by democratic principles, we have learned valuable lessons to act upon and share. With the help of the international community, we are steadily taking steps to bring closure to the saga of the victims of dictatorship in our country. So far, we have successfully managed the transitional justice and reform processes. Moving forward, we count on your support in the next critical stages of ensuring justice, reconciliation, reparation where necessary. The Gambia will continue advocating preventive approaches to peace building to avert future conflicts. Once again, I take this opportunity to express our appreciation of all the support the UN Peacebuilding Commission has been extending to us. Mr. President, the ongoing conflicts in Palestine, Sudan, the Sahel, Ukraine and Russia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Libya, and other conflict zones demand the international community's immediate intervention. We must explore all diplomatic means to restore lasting peace worldwide and free all innocent people, particularly women and children, from the calamities of war. We call on the international community to prioritize support for the post-conflict reconstruction of Gaza and the improvement of economic conditions in the West Bank, even though the situation in that region is extremely serious. The intense destruction of lives and property continues. The Israel occupation, expansion of settlements, blockade of Gaza, and restrictions in the West Bank, together with the threat of intensifying the war to a regional conflict, continue to worsen the ongoing tensions in the Middle East. Accordingly, I call on the United Nations, the international community, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC member states, to join forces and urgently bring about permanent peace in Palestine. Through recognized structures, I am, as chair of the OIC, committed to stepping up efforts and exploring every possible diplomatic and peaceful channel to resolve the Middle East crisis. The OIC has been very active, and under my leadership will continue to promote and pursue peace in that region. Our common objective is to create a situation wherein Israel and Palestine coexist in peace and security under a two-state arrangement and within the recognized pre-1967 borders. With the sustained support of the OIC, the Gambia has stood as a beacon of hope for the oppressed Rohingya Muslims of Myanmar. Despite relentless efforts over the past 5 years, the oppressive regime of Myanmar has intensified its oppressive campaign through forced exile and unspeakable acts of violence. During my current 3-year tenure as OIC chairman, my office will be available also for dialogue to bring lasting peaceful relations between Iran, its immediate neighbors, and our Western partners. Globally, we have the collective responsibility of acting speedily to peacefully address the situation in Palestine, Sudan, Ukraine, and the Sahel region. Mr. President, we commend the efforts of the Kingdom of Morocco and the viability of the Moroccan Autonomy Initiative. The initiative aligns with the principles of the UN Charter, and it provides a platform for all parties involved in the Moroccan Sahara conflict to engage in a UN-led dialogue for a permanent, mutually agreed political solution. With regard to recognition and respect for the One China principle, we continue to stand with China. The People's Republic of China represents renewed hope for global
of June
rebalancing
2023
justice,
and
peace,
open for
and
ratification
development.
since the 20th of September
Chinese-
2023.
China's general
This
support
agreement
to
is
its
a
southern
crucial
neighbors
tool.
through its numerous development cooperation initiatives has proven usefully impactful and strategic. Mr. President, migration has ever been a fundamental aspect of human development, and it significantly contributes to the growth of both home and host countries. The international community should address migration in a regulated manner and decriminalize it. Indeed, human beings should not risk losing their lives in pursuit of a better future. In this regard, the Gambia is collaborating with relevant countries to improve the plight of migrants, although we must discourage irregular migration. We are duty-bound to respect the rights of migrants and ensure they are treated with dignity, Mr. President. We recognize that dictatorship, conflict, climate change, poverty, and lack of opportunities are part of the root causes of migration. Economic sanctions imposed on states also contribute to forced migration. The long-standing U.S. embargo against Cuba is an example. My view is that these embargoes should give way to renewed good neighborliness and cooperative relations between the two nations. The international community should address inequality and compassion and fulfill the commitment to the official development assistance pledge made by donor countries. As regards the original countries of migrants, we must uphold the ideals and principles of democracy, good governance, and wise resource management approaches, Mr. President. In conclusion, the international community must prioritize diplomacy, dialogue, and mutual understanding as we confront challenges of global concern. I also urge the private sector to collaborate with our governments in taking concrete actions towards our common goals. Simple yet impactful steps, such as supporting local initiatives, promoting inclusive policies, and engaging in global partnerships can make a significant difference in the world order. Despite the challenges we face, there is immense potential for positive change through collective endeavors. Let us embrace a message of hope, resilience, and optimism for the future. Together, we can create a world where peace, sustainable development, and human dignity are not mere dreams, but a reality for all. I thank you for your kind attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of the Gambia. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Edgar Leblanc Fils, President of the Presidential Council of the Transition of the Republic of Haiti. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly. Excellencies, President of the General Assembly, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Heads of Delegation, distinguished delegates, dear compatriots, I have the immense honor to represent here at the General Assembly of the United Nations the Haitian people at a particular crossroads in our history. We are a proud people. Despite all of the difficulties, we've always been able to lift ourselves up. The first black republic in the world, Haiti is proud of its heroic fight for freedom and human dignity. Today, we find ourselves at a decisive crossroads. It is with the weight of this history on our shoulders that we have a hope for a better future. This is how I address you today, calling for solidarity on the part of the international community. Allow me, firstly, to address my warm congratulations to you, Excellency Philemon Yang, former Prime Minister of Cameroon, and congratulate you on your election as President of the 79th session of the General Assembly. Haiti stands firmly by your side, and we assure you of our full support throughout your mandate in order to ensure that this session will be a success for the entire international community. I would also like to indicate the exceptional quality of the work of your predecessor at the 78th session, His Excellency Mr. Dennis Francis of Trinidad and Tobago, who conducted work with dexterity, leadership, and wisdom. I would also like to take this opportunity to express on behalf of the Haitian people our gratitude to you, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, for your visit to Haiti, your presence on our soil, and your unfailing support for our request to the Security Council, in particular with regard to reinforcement of the national police in Haiti, and for all your interventions in favor of Haiti have been very much appreciated, and we will never forget. I would like to express my extreme thanks to the international community for the support given to my country during these times of crisis. This solidarity, which can be seen through the security initiatives, also those of humanitarian aid and support for development, is very much appreciated. It is through this ongoing cooperation and adapted to our situation that Haiti is becoming stronger, more resilient, and will continue towards development and progress. I would like to greet here all Haitian compatriots throughout the world who, whilst being attached to their country of birth, are forced to seek out more favorable skies in order to make a living. Everyone recognizes that they're very hard workers, and I want to tell them, wherever they are, that the Presidential Council of Transition and the government is thinking of them whilst we await an improvement of conditions so that they can come back into the fold. I would also like to take this opportunity to greet Amnesty International and other organizations closely following up on the defense of human rights of Haitians and violations of these rights throughout the world. On behalf of the entire Haitian people, I would like to extend a brotherly greeting to all friends of Haiti that have shown solidarity towards the migrants from our country, and in particular those living in Springfield, Ohio in the United States. The long history of friendship and reciprocal solidarity between our two nations since our participation in the Battle of Savannah of 1779 have enabled us to say with confidence that the American people reject any incitement to hate against our community. The active participation of Haitian immigrants at various levels of life in the United States is tangible and significant. In this regard, the passions that naturally arise during an election campaign should never serve as a pretext for xenophobia or racism in a country such as the United States, a country forged by immigrants from all countries and which has become a model of democracy for the world. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this 79th General Assembly is leaving no one behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development and human dignity for present and future generations. This very much resounds with the major challenges that we are facing today. This theme is an urgent call for unity and international cooperation in a context where inequalities, conflicts and the climate crisis are rendering even more vulnerable millions of people throughout the world. Whilst many nations are struggling to achieve these sustainable development goals, it is more necessary than ever to guarantee that all voices, and in particular those of the most marginalized, are included in the global decision-making process. This theme is also of capital importance when it comes to the context of the crisis in Haiti. It speaks to our fight to restore peace and stability, ensuring that every Haitian citizen is able to enjoy their fundamental rights. Acting together, as underscored by the theme, is essential for Haiti because our recovery can only happen with this international solidarity. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today our world is facing unprecedented challenges that are of deep concern to the entire international community. The United Nations, in its historic mission to promote peace, security, and sustainable development, is in the front lines of the crises that are not only threatening isolated nations, but the entirety of humanity. Climate change undoubtedly is one of the great perils of our time. According to recent data of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, global temperatures have already increased by 1.1 degrees Celsius since the pre-industrial era. This increase has led to an increase in intensification of climate phenomena such as hurricanes, droughts, and floods, disasters which particularly affect the most vulnerable nations such as Haiti. In 2023, the United Nations Programme for Development estimated that more than 100 million additional people risk descending into poverty between now and 2030 due to the effects of climate change. For Haiti, which is part of the countries that emit the least greenhouse gases but which experiences the most devastating impacts of this, this global crisis is making it even more difficult for us to guarantee food security, access to drinking water, and economic stability. Armed conflicts also continue to sow destruction and to ravage human lives. According to the High Commissioner of the United Nations for Refugees, the number of people forcibly displaced was 110 million in 2023. That's the highest figure that we've ever seen. Whether it be in Syria, in Ukraine, or in the Sahel region, these prolonged conflicts are exacerbating poverty, destroying vital infrastructure, and leading to massive flows of refugees. The world cannot remain inactive when millions of men, women, and children are fleeing violence in search of security and dignity. The commitment of the international community is more necessary than ever before in order to find diplomatic solutions and to promote peace initiatives. Another major challenge relates to economic inequality, which continues to get worse. According to the Human Development Report of 2023 of the UNDP, almost 1.2 billion people are still living in multidimensional poverty, namely that they lack access to essential services such as health, education, and conditions for a decent life. The COVID-19 pandemic has worsened these inequalities, pushing millions of additional people into poverty. For nations such as Haiti, this impact has been devastating. With a high level of poverty, the country is facing profound structural challenges, but these inequalities are not just a Haitian problem. They are a global problem which requires global economic reform. Moreover, the challenges linked to food insecurity have become worse in recent years. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, more than 735 million people in the world suffered from famine in 2022, an alarming increase that reflects the disruptions caused by conflicts, economic crises, and climate change. Haiti, unfortunately, is no exception to this. The World Food Programme recently underscored that almost half of the Haitian population is in a situation of acute food insecurity. This situation is not just a humanitarian emergency, but it is a threat for the stability of our nation. We must work together to strengthen our farming systems, guarantee fair access to food resources, and fight against hunger in a concerted and sustainable manner. Finally, technological progress provides new opportunities, but also new threats. The acceleration in the development of artificial intelligence, the proliferation of cyber attacks, and disinformation are endangering the stability of democracies throughout the world. The report of the International Telecommunications Union demonstrates that the digital divide remains a major challenge, with almost 2.7 billion people still not having access to the internet in 2023. Haiti is one of the least connected countries, and we urgently need support in order to fill in this digital divide so that we can fully participate in the global economy of the 21st century. This year, Haiti reaffirms its commitment in favor of the preservation of our common heritage, the oceans. That's why today I announced proudly that Haiti will sign the agreement on marine biodiversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction adopted on the 19th of June 2023 and open for ratification since the 20th of September 2023. This agreement is a crucial tool to guarantee the protection of marine biodiversity, to promote sustainable use of marine resources and strengthen the resilience of island states such as our own in the face of climate challenges. Haiti has decided to cooperate with the international community to ensure that this agreement is a benefit to all of humanity while making our contribution to the protection of marine ecosystems on which we all depend. These global challenges can only be addressed through a renewed commitment to multilateralism, through solidarity and collective action. Haiti, despite our difficulties, is ready to cooperate with the international community to overcome these crises and build a future where peace, justice, and human dignity are triumphant. But we can't do this alone. It's only together that we can act to guarantee that no one is left behind. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in proclaiming the independence of Haiti in January 1804, General Jean-Jacques Dessalines, the founding father of our homeland, gave human rights a universal character. He began the dismantling of the colonial and slave order, and then human rights ceased just being white man's human rights and became human rights for all men and all women, namely the rights of all humankind. In this regard, and as representative of the Republic of Haiti, and as an official spokesperson for the Haitian people, I must draw the attention of the leaders of the major powers to the danger of a nuclear war threatening the existence of peoples on all continents. In this regard, on behalf of the Republic of Haiti, I launch an urgent call to all heads of state of the United Nations to prevent humanity experiencing this peril of the end of civilization on Earth. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am speaking today with the experience of several years dedicated in the service of my country. My political career is very much anchored in the history of Haiti, and it's led me through various trials, always with the same goal in mind: the progress of my country, the pride, the restored dignity and the well-being of the Haitian people that are so downtrodden. Having presided the Senate of the Republic from 1995 to 2000, and having been a witness to critical moments in our political history, I have seen the challenges that our country has been facing. My political commitment goes back to a time when the fight for stability and democracy were everywhere. Today, as President of the Presidential Council of Transition, I find myself once again at a key point in the history of Haiti. My career has shown me that resilience and collective willingness are the only ways to guarantee a stable and prosperous future. It is with this vision, this devotion, and the strength given to me by this rich political experience that I am leading the transition, determined to lead Haiti towards peace, security, and participatory democracy through the holding of the National Conference and the renewal of politicians through free, credible, and transparent elections. The Haitian people, despite the challenges that we face, refuses to be overcome by despair. The challenges are unprecedented: devastating violence, political instability that is persistent, a precarious situation virtually everywhere, and a humiliating level of poverty that challenged the Haitian people's capacity for action and their intelligence. In the middle of this storm, we understood that we had to take a brave decision, that of coming together, becoming unified despite deep differences in order to rise up again in full confidence towards an exit to the multi-dimensional crisis that has been afflicting us now for far too long. The creation of the Presidential Council of the Transition is how we put this decision into force. It's a tangible example of this willingness to become reconciled with ourselves. This council, which brings together organizations of civil society and the entire political spectrum, is the fruit of long negotiations. It is the embodiment of the plurality of Haitian society. Its roadmap is clear: to restore public order, to hold free and transparent elections at the end of 2025, to restore trust in the institutions of the state. In order to do this, we, those that bear responsibility at the highest levels of the state, know that we will need the support of the international community. But first and foremost, we have to be able to count on ourselves, on our resilience, our capacity to overcome differences and internal divisions. It is important to stress that the resolution of Haiti's problems lies above all on the shoulders of the Haitian people. It is our duty as a sovereign nation to take our destiny in our hands and to overcome divisions and together build a future of peace and prosperity. However, this responsibility is not just our own. The international community, the United Nations, the foreign powers that very often played a decisive role in the history of Haiti have also got their essential part to play in this restoration of peace, economic recovery, and the institutional development and the establishment of the rule of law. In this sense, the failure of Haiti to recover is not that of just one nation. It is a collective failure, a global inability to fully respect the principles of solidarity, justice, and international cooperation. It is together with a shared sense of responsibility and renewed commitment that we will be able to transform this crisis into an opportunity to embark upon a sustainable path to peace. Today, Haiti is facing an unprecedented security crisis. The increase of armed gangs, generalized violence, and political instability have plunged the nation into a state of extreme vulnerability. Citizens live in fear, unable to move around freely throughout the country, to go and work or send their children to school without risk, particularly in the capital Port-au-Prince. This situation is affecting all aspects of Haitian society. It's weakening institutions, paralyzing the economy, and it's undermining hope in a better tomorrow. The future of the country is under threat. 50% of gang members from the capital region are made up of children and young people, girls and boys. They very often serve as cannon fodder during operations against the police. They are subject to serious violations of all kinds, including sexual violence. This abuse and violence exercised against children and young people, teenagers, must be considered as a crime against humanity, given the consequences that this has on future generations. The restoration of national security is an absolute priority for the Haitian authorities. They are fully committed to putting an end to this spiral of violence and to restoring order in order to guarantee every citizen the fundamental right that they have to security. They are aware that peace and stability are the indispensable foundations that will enable Haiti to rebuild and restore trust in its institutions and to ensure the socio-economic development of its people. With this in mind, the decision of the Security Council to authorize the deployment of the Multinational Security Support Mission through Resolution 2699 was a direct response to the calls of the Haitian people. This mission, although it is not a classic UN force, embodies the commitment of the international community to support Haiti in its fight against insecurity. I would like, on behalf of the Haitian people, to express my profound thanks to the contributing countries, particularly Kenya, for having accepted to take on the leadership of the mission, as well as to all countries that have provided their support. The national security forces, with the support of the mission, have already demonstrated tangible results on the ground, making it possible for the population, little by little, to see normal life restored, but a lot still remains to be done. Haiti has hosted several United Nations missions over the last 3 decades, particularly MINUSTAH. Although some of these missions have helped to temporarily stabilize the country, they have also left behind a heavy heritage of consequences. Allegations of serious violations of human rights have eroded the trust of the Haitian people. The lack of prosecutions and reparations for the victims have reinforced a sentiment of impunity, undermining the efforts at rebuilding. Nevertheless, it's never too late to act and to learn lessons from the past. By rethinking the approach, we have the opportunity to boost the reputation of international missions in Haiti and to build a future that is better for the Haitian people. It is in this spirit that we would like to see a thought being given to transforming the security support mission into a peacekeeping mission under the mandate of the United Nations. This transformation would make it possible not only to secure more stable funding and to extend the capacity of the mission, but also it would make it possible to strengthen the commitment of member states to security in Haiti. I am convinced that this change of status, whilst recognizing that the errors of the past cannot be repeated, would guarantee the full success of the mission in Haiti. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today I stand before this assembly as the voice of the Republic of Haiti, a country whose history is inextricably linked to the ideals of freedom and justice that we all celebrate here. But Haiti, the first independent black nation of the world, today is the greatest victim of a historical injustice which has not only delayed our development but has also saddled our people with a burden, the repercussions of which we still feel today. In 1825, just 21 years after having won its freedom at the cost of a heroic fight, Haiti was forced to pay a colossal debt to France, the colonizing country, in exchange for recognizing its independence. This ransom, imposed under threat, siphoned off resources of the young nation, plunging it into an infernal cycle of impoverishment, which it still struggles to overcome. This debt was a form of punishment for our audacity in throwing off the chains of slavery and raising up Haitians to claim their human dignity. It was an unjust penalty which asphyxiated the economic and social potential of the black people of Haiti for generations. In today's context, where more than ever attention is being paid to efforts to restore without delay security and respond to the immense humanitarian needs in Haiti, I think it is important to draw the attention of this assembly to the after effects of our colonial past and the ransom paid to certain powers that have largely mortgaged the development of Haiti. It is worth recalling that Haiti was the only country to have paid for its independence, obtained, however, through the fire and the sword. On the eve of the 200th anniversary of this unprecedented event in history, hasn't the time come for these amounts paid to be returned? In this regard, my country welcomes the proposals made by a number of governments and also some agencies of the United Nations for specific action with regard to recognition, reparation and restitution for the wrongs of the past. Haiti has absolute confidence in the United Nations organization, the pillars of which are the fight against inequality between peoples and the maintenance of peace between nations, that it will play its role in order to facilitate dialogue between the victim countries of colonization and the former colonial powers. Here, at the 79th session of the General Assembly, Haiti, and through my person, Haiti is not only here to request reparations, but to ask a question of principle, that of imminent justice. My approach is resolutely committed, structured and well documented. The National Committee for Restitution and Reparation, in cooperation with CARICOM's Restorations Commission, has already undertaken exhaustive work on this subject. We demand recognition of the moral and historic debt and the implementation of just and appropriate reparations, which will make it possible for our people to free themselves from the invisible chains of this unjust past. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, history teaches us that nations do not rise up in isolation, but by unifying forces in a resolute commitment to build a better future. Haiti, this land that has offered the world a symbol of unshakable freedom and which has helped several nations to throw off their yoke of barbaric colonialism, is not looking for charity, but justice, respect, respect for its dignity and its right to a dignified and prosperous existence. The challenges that we face today are certainly huge, but they are not insurmountable. They require of us all a shared vision, a profound sense of our common humanity and determination to turn crises into opportunities for renewal. Each nation, be they small or large, rich or vulnerable, has part of our collective future in their hands. It is in this interdependence that resides the genuine strength of multilateralism. May this general debate be the moment where we reaffirm our unfailing commitment towards peace, human dignity, and sustainable development, because what we do today will resound for centuries to come. History will judge the way that we have been able to respond to the challenges of our times. Together, in a spirit of solidarity and cooperation, we can and we must build a future where no people, no nation is left behind. Long live Haiti. Long live international cooperation. Tomorrow, another country. Tomorrow, another world. I thank you for your attention.
Je remercie.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Presidential Council of the Transition of the Republic of Haiti.
Seguidamente, la Asamblea
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Abdel Fattah al-Burhan Abdelrahman al-Burhan, President of the Transitional Sovereign Council of the Republic of the Sudan. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Sayyid al-Rais.
In the name of God, most merciful, most compassionate. Mr. President, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Majesties, Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may the peace and blessings of God be upon you. I speak before you today on behalf of the people and the government of Sudan. I would like to congratulate the President of this 79th session of the General Assembly and his team. We wish you every success, especially in the face of various threats to peace and security, threats which endanger our organization and which undermine freedom, peace, and justice, leading to the violation of the law. Sudan stands convinced of the important role played by the United Nations. We support all initiatives geared towards reforming the organization and its body, specifically the Security Council, with a view to enshrining pluralism, collective security, and upholding human rights, all the while tackling the challenges of climate change and ethnically and ideologically motivated terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, Sudan commends the choice of theme for this topic, for this session, Unity and Diversity for the Advancement of Peace, Sustainable Development and Human Dignity. We welcome the priorities set by the president of this 79th session. Furthermore, it's important to implement the outcomes of the Summit of the Future, especially as regards United Nations reform and Security Council reform, so that these bodies can put an end to the protracted crises threatening international peace, as well as to achieve consensus and harmony in the relations between states and peoples. Unilateral measures taken outside the United Nations framework in complete violation of the UN Charter and international law, political and economic restrictions, these are the main drivers of instability, especially as regards security, the economy, and also on the political front. All of this fuels war. However, I must also add that double standards and selectiveness are currently prevailing in international affairs. There can be no doubt about it. Sudan is facing very serious challenges. And in fact, a war is being waged. There's a conspiracy. A war is being waged by a group that has rebelled against the state for many years. It's receiving political and logistical support at the local and regional levels. You've all witnessed the crimes, the violations, and the atrocities committed by these rebels, targeting the Sudanese people and the Sudanese state. The war began with an attempt to seize power through force. With time, it's transformed into a total war against the Sudanese state and the Sudanese people. Countless crimes are being committed: ethnic cleansing, forced displacement, and genocide. All of this has been committed by the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, which should be considered a terrorist group. This militia is continuing to perpetrate crimes, and it is most unfortunate that it is receiving the support of some states in the region. States which are providing funding and mercenaries for their own political and economic benefit, in flagrant violation of law and international will. Mr. President, these terrorist groups have also hit diplomatic missions, other organizations, and property. They have not spared the UN. And in fact, UN headquarters, the UN office in Sudan, has been targeted. The Dagalo family has been violating all laws and all international obligations with impunity. The family refuses to comply with the Jeddah Declaration and rejects UN Security Council resolutions regarding the arms embargo imposed on Darfur. Thus, ethnic cleansing crimes are continuing. Most recently, we also recorded a violation of the resolution on El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur State. This begs the question, why has the international system not taken any firm or dissuasive measures vis-à-vis this group and those who support it? Despite everything that's been done, all the crimes, we witnessed crimes against humanity, war crimes, despite their refusal to implement Security Council resolutions and decisions adopted by regional organizations, all the more reason to call for Security Council reform to avoid this policy of impunity and double standards becoming key characteristics of this organization. Ladies and gentlemen, this devastating aggression being waged by the RSF with the support of states in the region, providing funding and mercenaries, as well as weapons to the RSF, have resulted in deaths of dozens of thousands of Sudanese and the displacement of many millions more. Sudanese people have been forced to leave their lands, their motherland, to evade these armed groups. They've taken refuge in various regions. Millions more Sudanese are living in peace today in other parts of the country. Systematic attacks committed by the militia are contributing to the suffering of our compatriots. As a result, we've been seeking a peaceful solution to the situation, and the Jeddah Declaration, dated May 2023, should have been enough to put an end to this war. And yet, regional political players who are in favor of the war have a different take on the situation. This has resulted in the situation we have on our hands today. As a result, and so as to alleviate the suffering of our fellow Sudanese and to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance, we've opened our borders and airports. We've lifted all impediments to this aid being delivered. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the Sudanese government is steadfastly committed to facilitating humanitarian assistance, protecting humanitarian convoys and personnel, as well as medical personnel. We fully uphold international humanitarian law and measures geared towards the protection of civilians. The protection of civilians is our responsibility, especially when women and children are being hit the hardest by violations committed in areas controlled by the militias. Some women and children have even been sold in marketplaces. The humanitarian crisis affecting a large majority of our population, owing to the aggression being waged by the Dagala militia, require us to act in concert with one another. It's necessary to provide assistance to millions of displaced persons and refugees. On our side, we're doing everything within our power so as to ensure that aid is delivered to those who need it most. We would like to thank all neighboring states who've welcomed displaced persons and refugees. We thank organizations providing assistance to the Sudanese people as well. President, we face a very tall challenge. This organization must shoulder its responsibility, specifically so as to protect developing countries in the face of the avarice of some other states who would like to control our people's riches through the use of force, and specifically through the use of money. We hope that the will of our people will prevail. Numerous crises, including the one underway in Sudan, are the product of a policy of double standards, as well as political approaches based on exerting power, economic blackmail, and the fact that the organization has not managed to deter those who defy the will of their people and of nations, threatening international peace and security. Mr. President, today we have a marketplace of initiatives. Some of these initiatives serve narrow interests, and the corrosive effects of this are patently obvious. In our countries, artificial conflicts are growing in number. For this reason, we need national ownership, this particular principle, and that's why since the start of the crisis, we've done everything we could to put an end to this war and to spare our country from the destruction being waged by the Dagalo militia, attacking the Sudanese people. Thus, we contributed to various constructive initiatives. And we still harbor hopes of ending this conflict so as to guarantee the dignity of the Sudanese people and the sovereignty of our state. We are hoping to ensure that the conflict will not be resumed and conflicts will end. The path towards an end to this conflict is clear in our view. First and foremost, we need to put an end to the hostilities. The militias must withdraw from all of the areas they currently occupy and from which people have been displaced. They must lay down their weapons so that people can go back to their homes and so that assistance can be delivered. This will also facilitate the reopening of roads, airports, and the resumption of production. Second, this end to hostilities must be accompanied with a comprehensive political process so that we can see through the political transition, avoiding the resumption of war and potential coups d'etats. Mr. President, the Sudanese Armed Forces, the SAF, is one of the state's oldest institutions. It's non-politicized. It's very much in favor of a democratic transition, and it's committed to the right of the Sudanese people to pick its leadership. This is why the SAF is upholding the commitments undertaken as part of the glorious 2019 revolution, so that a consensus government, an elected government, can accede to power. We will never accept a return to the previous regime, which was rejected by the Sudanese people. Thus, we are very much committed to facilitating the transition process, moving towards a civilian government. We will continue pursuing peace, working with all groups who have laid down their weapons, as well as with groups who still carry weapons but who are willing to respect the Juba Peace Agreement signed in 2020. Throughout this war, the Sudanese Armed Forces have done everything they possibly could, continuing to uphold international humanitarian law as well as the Geneva Conventions and Protocols thereto, working to protect civilians and to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance. We stand ready to partake in all initiatives that can help to put an end to this war. As soon as we have an initiative that would respect the principle of national ownership and will put an end to the control and occupation of our territory by this rebel militia. We are also in favor of all initiatives which will protect civilians and guarantee the dignity of our people. These are the prerequisites for a return to democracy. It's unacceptable for a government as well as for the Sudanese people to partake in these, to see organizations who've supported the war, states who've supported the war and massacres of Sudanese partaking in such initiatives. Some of these organizations and states have allowed weapons to be funneled through their territory to the militias, and they've also provided political support to these rebel groups. We must therefore continue acting to convince the aggressors that they shouldn't be receiving this assistance. Mr. President, I'd like to thank all of the states as well as the organizations and various human rights defense groups, as well as civil society organizations, all those who've tried to paint a true, accurate picture of what is happening in Sudan. I welcome the outcome of the Summit, the Great Lakes Summit in Rwanda, and the meeting that took place in Yaoundé. There, at all of these meetings, the RSF were described as a rebel group working against the state. We've managed to circumscribe the activities of this group and deter them. Hopefully, we'll be able to deter them from acting in a similar fashion in other countries. The RSF should be called should be called out for what they are. They've rebelled against the state. They're committing terrorist crimes and should be considered as such here at the United Nations. Mr. President, before I conclude, I'd like to reassert our position vis-à-vis the issue of Palestine and the right of the Palestinian people to establish an independent state within 1967 borders. It's necessary to put an immediate end to the aggression being waged in Gaza and in Lebanon. We also call for Palestine to become a fully fledged member of the United Nations. By way of conclusion, we'd like to extend our gratitude to all those who've supported us through these testing times. Millions of Sudanese still need your help. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to reiterate that the will of the Sudanese people will prevail. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Transitional Sovereign Council of the Republic of the Sudan. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Carlos Manuel Villanova, President of the Democratic Republic of São Tomé and Príncipe. I request protocol to escort His Excellency, and I invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, distinguished head of state and government, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great honor that I address this honorable assembly, representing TomÄ and PrincÄ, a small island state which, like so many others, face the complex challenges of our time. On behalf of the people of TomÄ and PrincÄ, I would like to congratulate you, Mr. President, and I would also like to extend to the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, our warmest congratulations. Excellencies, it is easy for me, as it is for anyone present in this assembly, to say that what stands out in relation to international issues is the uncertainty and insecurity that marks both the present and the future. As a small island state, my country is on the front line of the consequences of climate change, and the climate crisis represents the greatest existential threat to our populations. Although we are responsible for a tiny fraction of global greenhouse gas emissions, we are among those who suffer most from its impacts. Sea level rise, more frequent and intense storms, coastal erosion and loss of biodiversity threaten not only our livelihoods, but also our very existence. It is therefore imperative that the international community strengthens its commitment to the Paris Agreement and ensures that the voices of the most affected nations, like ours, are heard and integrated into concrete actions. We call for global action that is not only ambitious, but also urgent. COP29 on climate change, to be held next November in Baku, Azerbaijan, will be a crucial opportunity to reaffirm the collective commitment to limit global warming to 1.5 Celsius. However, commitments have not been sufficient. We need concrete, immediate actions to mitigate the impacts of the climate crisis. We call on the largest emitters to meet their historical and moral obligations by drastically reducing their emissions and honoring the climate financing promised to developing countries, which are paying the price for a crisis they did not cause. In addition, we call for an expansion of financing mechanisms for adaptation, as we need to strengthen our resilience. We are already investing in innovative adaptation solutions, such as sustainable use of our marine resources and the implementation of renewable energies. However, our efforts need to be scaled up, and this requires the support of the international community. Ladies and gentlemen, the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, remain a beacon for our progress. For us, sustainable development is not a choice, but yes, a necessity. Our vision of the future is based on the Sustainable Development Goals, and it is in this sense that we strive for a balance between economic growth, environmental protection, and social justice. However, the deadline for achieving them is fast approaching, and for many of us, there is still a long way to go. Support for development must be renewed, and new models of partnership between nations must be explored. We reaffirm our commitment to the SDGs, but without an international environment that promotes fair trade, accessible financing, and peace, our efforts will be limited. We ask for the support of the international community so that our transition to a green economy can be accelerated, and so that together we can be examples of how sustainable development can transform societies and ensure prosperity for future generations. On the other hand, we cannot fail to mention the importance of strengthening multilateral institutions, and ensuring that all states, regardless of their size or economic power, have a voice in global decisions. Multilateralism is our best tool for tackling collective challenges that transcend borders. Ladies and gentlemen, global peace and security face growing threats, from armed conflicts to the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. The African continent continues to be the scene of protracted conflicts that result in deep and unacceptable suffering. These conflicts demonstrate the need for greater diplomatic intervention and African solutions to African problems. Tomã and PrincÃ calls on the international community to step up efforts to mediate and support the peaceful resolution of conflicts in Africa while respecting the sovereignty of nations. Peace is the foundation on which we build development. Unfortunately, we continue to witness the escalation of conflicts in various parts of the world, such as the recent worsening on the situation in the Gaza Strip and Lebanon. Tomã and PrincÄ reaffirms its firm commitment to the principles of peace and human rights and calls for respect for sovereignty of states and intensification of diplomatic efforts for the peaceful resolution of conflicts. There can be no development without peace, and peace is only possible with justice. Excellencies, the future we want must be built on the foundations of cooperation, solidarity, and mutual understanding. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated the interdependence of nations and the need for joint responses to global challenges. We need to continue strengthening multilateralism, promoting the sharing of knowledge, resources, and innovative solutions. Tomã and PrincÄ reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the principles that govern this organization. We believe that, through dialogue and cooperation, we will be able to tackle the greatest challenges of our time, from climate change to poverty, to the promotion of human rights and equity. Ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations celebrate this year 79 years of existence. This is a lifetime that gives the UN a special status. Indeed, this observation cannot be taken lightly. In fact, it has been almost 8 decades of intense work and unrepeatable experiences like no other organization has achieved in the efforts to obtain and maintain peace and achieve other global public goods. On this occasion, we must praise the inescapable commitment of the Secretary General, whose action on all fronts touches us deeply. Faced with our persistent dilemmas, it is imperative that we bring a new content of hope to the world stage. This is an unavoidable objective and role of the United Nations, but this mission is also ours. The world's current affliction is not inevitability. If we empty the United Nations and if each state incurs the spirit of each fighting for itself, then the result will be to live with no answer global problems such as wars, economic crisis, environmental crisis, and other ills. The world has changed since the creation of this organization. The international system, like its institutions, must evolve to reflect the realities and needs of today. We advocate for the reform of the United Nations Security Council to make it more representative and effective in its mission to maintaining global peace and security. The multipolar world we live in today demands a more inclusive and dynamic UN. In saying this, I emphasize the need to think of Africa as a part of the world. We cannot continue with a Security Council that reflects the power structures of 1945, a period when most of the current African states were still under colonial rule and therefore had no voice in international affairs. This underrepresentation of the continent is also evident in other structures of global governance, such as the international financial institutions, and we urgently need to change this. Excellencies, I would also like to take this opportunity to echo a call that has resounded here in this assembly for decades: the need to put an end to the economic, commercial and financial blockade imposed against the Republic of Cuba. This blockade is outdated and contrary to the principles of peaceful coexistence and solidarity between nations. The Cuban people have shown resilience, but it is time for the international community, in particular the United Nations, to intensify its efforts to correct this injustice in the name of peace and human dignity. We also reaffirm our support for Morocco's sovereignty and congratulate the political initiatives developed in the search for a peaceful and credible solution to the dispute. We also welcome the strategic projects launched by the Kingdom of Morocco, such as the Morocco-Nigeria gas pipeline and the Atlantic Africa Initiative, which reflect the vision of regional integration and sustainable growth. Excellencies, in conclusion, we would like to reaffirm that our presence here is a testimony to our faith in the United Nations and its ideals. Despite our limited resources, we bring to the global table our tireless will to contribute to a fairer, safer and more sustainable world. TomÄ and PrincÄ is ready to do its part and continues to work hand in hand with all the nations present to build a better future for all. Thank you very much.
En nombre de la Asamblea.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Democratic Republic of Tomã and Príncipe.
La Asamblea es...
The Assembly will now hear an address by His Majesty King Letsie III, King of the Kingdom of Lesotho. I request protocol to escort His Majesty, and I invite him to address the Assembly.
Your Excellency, the President of the 79th session of the General Assembly, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, I wish to congratulate you on your well-deserved election to the office of President of the 79th session of the General Assembly. I'm confident that with your vast experience and wealth of knowledge, you will successfully guide the Assembly to live up to its commitments. I therefore assure you of my delegation's full support and cooperation in all your endeavors. I would also like to pay my tribute to your predecessor, Mr. Dennis Francis, for the excellent manner in which he discharged his duties as President of the Assembly during the 78th session. To Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres, I express my country's deep gratitude and unwavering support for your exceptional work on behalf of humanity, especially amidst the significant challenges facing multilateralism today. Under your leadership, the United Nations has navigated numerous obstacles, including the COVID-19 pandemic, escalating debt crises, and the impacts of climate change. In your address to the General Assembly, you highlighted the importance of peace within communities, peace with justice, peace with dignity, and peace with nature, emphasizing that building peace is humanity's greatest responsibility. The UN was founded on the belief that nations can and should live together in peace and work with each other to resolve conflicts peacefully for the betterment of our lives. It also established the framework for justice, respect for international law, and the promotion of global socio-economic development. As the UN celebrates its 79th anniversary this year, we must reaffirm the enduring conviction of our founders and reassert their sense of purpose. As I stand here today, I resonate with these sentiments, drawing from our nation's history and experiences. This year, Lesotho commemorates 200 years since the founding of the Basotho Nation, with the pinnacle of this celebration occurring on the 4th of October. What, then, can we, as a smaller nation, contribute to the global discourse on peace? Mr. President, Lesotho was founded on the principle of peace, kgotso. Our founder, Morena Moshoeshoe I, cherished peace as one of his core values. Writers and researchers have described him as, and I quote, "no common man," as someone who stands out clear in the light, original, able, enlightened, and upright. His humanity, his mildness, his love of peace and justice, his horror of war, his forbearance under extreme provocation are conspicuous upon every occasion. End of quote. These are qualities that have inspired us as Basotho. Morena Moshoeshoe I was able to bring together different tribal groups, avert conflicts, and negotiate lasting peace that to this day we strive to maintain. Basotho are a nation built on tolerance, inclusion, and unity, which are also the key principles enshrined in the Secretary General's new agenda for peace. It is in this context that we hail as most appropriate the theme chosen for our general debate this year, namely, leaving no one behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for present and future generations. The relevance of this theme at the present juncture in international relations is beyond doubt. Through collective action, we can conquer the challenges facing humanity and realize a sustainable future for all. However, this will require leaders with humanity, mildness, a love of peace and justice, horror of war, and forbearance under extreme provocation. These are ideals that can be achieved. My ancestor, as testified by many, was the embodiment of these traits which built a nation that stands to this day. Business as usual will not preserve our world as we know it. The enjoyment and exercise of human rights and attainment of sustainable peace and development require a deliberate, fundamental shift and commitment by the world's leadership. In the words of another of my ancestors, and I quote, "Always be slow to take arms at all times. I beseech you, lean upon this rod of peace. Always keep it clear in your mind that it is far more profitable to harvest food in the grain fields than to kill men in the battlefields." End of quote. In today's rapidly changing world, the UN has continued to forge peace in conflict-ridden areas around the world, promoting human rights and lifting thousands out of poverty. Lesotho reaffirms its commitment to advance this collective vision of an effective United Nations to ensure a prosperous and a lasting future for all our people. Mr. President, the world faces significant challenges as the deadline for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals approaches. The 2024 SDG report indicates that only 16% of the targets are on track to be met by 2030, while 84% show limited or reversed progress. The UNCTAD 2024 report highlights a troubling trend where 48 developing countries spend more on loan interest payments to developed nations than on essential services like education and health. This economic inequality drives migration, and as refugees seek better opportunities, often leading to xenophobia and conflict in host countries. Addressing this inequality is crucial for fostering inclusive development and ensuring global peace and stability. To enhance the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, my government plans to present its third voluntary national review on sustainable development in 2025. Achieving this goal requires stronger partnerships and increased financial support, particularly for vulnerable countries that are both least developed and landlocked. The current crises of hunger, poverty, disease, and climate change threaten to reverse the progress made over the last century. In Lesotho, climate change exacerbates environmental degradation, impacting agriculture, water resources, and energy supplies, leading to food shortages, which have compelled our government to declare a state of emergency in food security. However, we are committed to responding to these challenges by pursuing opportunities that will enable greater self-sufficiency for the country. Lesotho's stock in trade is a high-quality suite of renewable energy resources of sun, wind, and a plentiful supply of the purest mountain water. We are therefore in a position to establish a sustainable renewable energy and water economy. Our priority is to satisfy the deficit in our domestic energy demand and to export clean energy and high-quality water to the region. Our goal to fully meet commitments of the Paris Accord well in advance of 2050 will be attained, with the potential of Lesotho being among the first countries in Africa to be a fully carbon-neutral electricity generator. We seek our own opportunity to navigate our own way in this complex world. Mr. President, It is essential to restore dignity and hope for women, youth, and marginalized communities who continue to experience a disproportionate level of vulnerabilities and disadvantages. Gender equality and the protection of women and girls from violence are fundamental human rights that must be prioritized. The government of Lesotho has implemented policies and laws to address these issues in line with regional and international commitments. Additionally, we continue to combat diseases like HIV/AIDS, achieving significant progress with 95% of those living with HIV knowing their status, 94% receiving treatment, and 98% of those on treatment virally suppressed. Since 2010, we have successfully reduced new HIV infections by 74%, demonstrating our commitment to public health and social equity. Mr. President, global peace and security are under threat from terrorism, illicit arms flows, organized crime, cybercrime, and financial crimes, hindering progress towards sustainable peace. This worrying state of affairs demands collective and resolute action to protect global peace, security, and stability for the benefit of all humanity. Mediation has proven effective in saving lives, minimizing resource costs, and preventing infrastructure destruction while facilitating reconciliation between opposing parties. Despite the UN's focus on peaceful dispute resolution, political tensions among member states have limited its mediation efforts. It is therefore essential for the UN Security Council to take a proactive leading role in the mediation of disputes. To achieve this, the Council must adopt a multilateral approach, as we believe this is the only way to ensure transparency, impartiality, and a sense of ownership of the mediation process by the wider UN membership. For this reason, we warmly welcome the Secretary General's new agenda for peace, which emphasizes the urgent need to rebuild mechanisms for managing disputes and enhancing trust among member states and regional frameworks. Mr. President, respecting and upholding human rights is a fundamental obligation of all states as outlined in the United Nations Charter. Self-determination and independence are essential rights that should be accessible to all people. We urge the full implementation of United Nations resolutions aimed at ending all forms of colonialism and occupation, particularly emphasizing the need for the self-determination of the people of the Western Sahara. Mr. President, the situation in the Middle East, especially the ongoing human rights violations in Gaza, requires urgent attention. We renew our call for a ceasefire, as both the General Assembly and the Security Council have repeatedly advocated for one. The high cost of war is a burden humanity should not bear. We believe in a two-state solution that allows Israelis and Palestinians to coexist peacefully and securely. Genuine dialogue and mediation respecting the rights and concerns of both parties are crucial for resolving the Palestine question. Additionally, we call for a mediated solution to the unilateral coercive measures on Cuba, as the international community has consistently demanded the lifting of the economic and commercial embargo. Cuba, like all member states, deserves the right to participate freely in international trade. And we also reiterate our call for the lifting of sanctions on Zimbabwe. Mr. President, to conclude, we would like to reiterate our belief in the principle of subsidiarity, recognizing the Security Council's primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. We therefore call for greater and more effective cooperation between the Council and regional organizations as outlined in Chapter 8 of the UN Charter. The strengthening of this cooperation is crucial for the swift resolution of regional conflicts. We believe that the Security Council should be more representative of UN membership to ensure its decisions enjoy greater legitimacy. Therefore, we advocate for a comprehensive reform of the Security Council, supporting the common African position known as the Isolini Consensus. We also believe that the UN should continue to be a place where all our aspirations for a better and secure life for humanity must be championed. Let us work together to build a United Nations that reflects a broad consensus among member states, reinforcing its central role in global governance and fostering collaboration with regional organizations while ensuring that all members respect its charter. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the King of the Kingdom of Lesotho. The Assembly will hear an address by Her Excellency Gordana Silyanovska-Davgova, President of the Republic of North Macedonia. I request protocol to escort Her Excellency and invite her to address the Assembly.
Distinguished President of the United Nations General Assembly, esteemed Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Those more familiar with the Macedonian case know about the Scillas and the Charybdis that my homeland, the small Balkan state, has passed through and is still passing through. Although indirectly, as one of the 6 constituent Yugoslav republics, we participated in the creation of the United Nations, yet, upon its admission to the United Nations in 1993, we faced a great injustice. Namely, the country was admitted under the temporary reference, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, along with the additional condition, I quote, to negotiate until a final solution to the name issue is found, end of quote. In 2018, we ratified and signed the Prespa Agreement, a process that was followed by an unsuccessful referendum and constitutional changes, following which the Republic of Macedonia legally and formally became the Republic of North Macedonia. As a professor of constitutional law and as a former member of the Venice Commission, I do know that what is legal is not always just and legitimate, because in the case of my country, it was not acted in accordance with international and national law, namely, the right to self-determination of every nation guaranteed by the UN Charter and the Constitution of the then Federal Yugoslavia from 1974 was forgotten. The line that divides what is legal from what is just is sometimes merely a crack, but other times it is a profound gap and even an abyss. That gap, that abyss, most often and most severely affects the small nations and states, which are the first victims of the clash between force and justice, because this can be an insurmountable obstacle to realizing the right to progress. Of course, the new name is indeed a formal and legal reality, and my country, the Republic of North Macedonia, as a responsible member state of the United Nations and of NATO, is fulfilling its international obligations. Still, the EU membership for which all of this was done not only did not come true, but the Macedonian citizens are now facing a repeated final condition for another constitutional amendment, but now not for membership, but for the start of negotiations, and this for the second time. To us, membership in the European Union after 20 years of negotiations and 16 positive European Commission reports resembles Mr. Godot, because we have been waiting for him since 2005, always encouraged by international representatives with the refrain, just this one condition more, just this one concession more, just this one constitutional amendment more. Thus, we became a sui generis state with 36 constitutional amendments in 30 years, anchored in the geopolitical region called the Western Balkans. As a peace-loving country, committed to good neighborliness and regional cooperation, we expect understanding and cooperation from our neighbors without the threat of a veto. Because if there is a veto, there is often no justice. The veto has turned into an instrument for bilateralization of European integration, or in other words, its stagnation. In conditions of conflict on the European soil, the stagnation of the European integration not only demotivates Macedonian citizens and slows down reforms, but it also destabilizes the region of Southeast Europe, leaving room for penetration of malignant imperial and great power influences. Enlargement must be tied to the meritocratic Copenhagen criteria, and it must be freed from the veto linked to the attempt to revise history and to disrespect national and cultural identity. From our European and strategic partners, we expect understanding and fair and just unblocking of the process of negotiations for membership in the European Union, rejecting double standards and respecting our own principles and values embedded in the fundamental constitutional documents. The European reunification is like an unfinished symphony without us. The European Union is not only a political system, it is also a political philosophy in which the largest number of Macedonian and Balkan political actors and citizens do believe. Integration is a powerful motive and a key driving force for democratic development. The full integration of the Balkans into the EU will put an end to the endless redrawing of borders and so-called Balkanization as a phenomenon. However, and of course, the Balkan states must behave in compliance with the European standards by regionally connecting and cooperating. The experience is valuable, and the help of the countries of the region that have become part of the EU already is precious. Same goes for those that are on the European path. We must learn to support each other, as was the case with the COVID pandemics, floods, and fires, instead of blocking each other on our European journey. Homo Balkanicus can become Homo Europicus whenever he wants. Esteemed Excellencies, the line that divides the legal from the just is not only intertwined in the Macedonian case, but also in almost all issues that are on the United Nations agenda, including those covered by the topic of this year's general debate, leaving no one behind and acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for present and future generations. We are faced with some big questions. Let me start with the most important one: peace. Is a just peace possible when we are faced with more and more wars and flagrant violations of the Charter of the United Nations? Is a just peace possible with the deepening militarization of politics and the new arms race? Is human dignity possible in an environment of double standards, when human life is not equally valued and when the sufferings of innocent victims in conflicts are not treated equally? How can we achieve a fair and just development plunged into the race for profit at the expense of the nations and of the planet, when global public resources are sacrificed, marginalized, stuck at the periphery, forgotten in national and corporate policies and actions? How can we achieve social justice in conditions of growing economic, educational, gender, and digital disparity between states and within the states themselves, with less and less winners and more losers from globalization and digitalization, the former sinking into decadence and the latter into pauperization? How will we ensure generational justice if we continue with the irresponsible and uncontrolled exploitation of limited resources? How will we create a safe and sustainable future for our descendants if we continue with ecocidal production practices and consumer habits that leave a world choked with air pollution, poisoned with pesticides, and littered with plastic? With the alarming level of greenhouse gas emissions that are rapidly leading to climate change with catastrophic consequences, can we even talk about responsibility, or should we start thinking about survival or our ability to live? The main problem is that all those injustices are systemic, which means that if they are not legalized, then they are tacitly tolerated. What is legal, unfortunately, is not always just and moral, if I may say this once again. Why is this so? In the most famous dialogue about power and justice, Thucydides recalls that justice is a word that has value in disputes between men only when both sides are of equal strength. In other cases, The strong do what they can, and the weak what they must. However, the United Nations exist to ennoble this cruel two-citizen world by securing legal equality among nations, taming the power of the great, and protecting the smaller nations. This legal equality is a prerequisite for achieving the highest goals of the United Nations: peace and security, human rights, and sustainable development. The United Nations exist to bridge, or at least to narrow, the gap between the legal and the just. We are facing a big challenge. How can the legal become just? Or how can the just become legal? And how can the legal and the just be implemented? Respected attendees, there are no simple, inexpensive, and painless solutions to this dual challenge. Here, in the solemn hall of the General Assembly, for years, world leaders have shared their experiences and disappointments from the United Nations, which, not infrequently, oscillate between two extremes: utopian optimism on one hand, and nihilistic pessimism on the other. Still, reality is complex and contains both successes and failures. The United Nations have prevented another world war, but they failed to prevent and preclude regional conflicts, including the war in Ukraine and the bloodshed in the Middle East, the scenes of which resemble Picasso's Guernica. The World Organization has lifted millions of people out of poverty, but it still fails to eradicate hunger. With the right to self-determination, it accelerated the process of decolonization, but failed to bridge the gap between the rich North and the poor South. The United Nations are the main driver for resolving global security, migration, health, environmental, energy, and climate crisis, but hardly any of them are fully and justly resolved. The resolutions of this very General Assembly reflect the will of the majority of nations, but are not always consistently respected. The International Court of Justice is the ultimate instance of justice between states, and yet its judgments are not always implemented or even treated as advice. The world is going through a turbulent geopolitical, economic, scientific, technological, and industrial transformation in which man has a huge impact on the planet. I fear man is destroying the Garden of Eden and will be kicked out of it again unless the UN supports him. But the competencies, structures, and procedures of the United Nations seem to have been frozen at the time of their founding in 1945. Instead of increased cooperation and action on pressing issues, the geopolitical rivalry and the new arms race are intensifying, that are rapidly pushing us towards a state resembling a new Second Cold War and Orwell's World II. We have rarely needed the United Nations so much as we do today, and yet the United Nations have rarely been as politically marginalized as they are today. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, to overcome this political marginalization, what we need is a new spirit of multilateralism that will alleviate geopolitical rivalries and will increase the trust and cooperation among states around shared challenges. That multilateralism rests on three pillars: The first pillar is the consistent compliance with the Charter of the United Nations and international law, which exists to protect the weaker from the predatory instincts of the stronger. In this context, the Macedonian state firmly perseveres on the stance that territorial claims and the attempt to acquire territory by force are a flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations. When dangerous precedents go unchallenged, they transform into tolerated practices that threaten world peace and security. Therefore, we support efforts for a sustainable, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine based on international law, including the UN Charter. In that regard, we fully complied with the common foreign and security policy of the European Union. This is important to us, since wars and conflicts also affect peace and stability of Southeast Europe and the Western Balkans. Multilateralism also depends on the respect of international treaties. As a country committed to good neighborliness and regional cooperation, we respect bilateral agreements with our neighbors and expect our neighbors to respect the agreements without abusing the right to a veto. The second pillar of multilateralism is consistent implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and the related Paris Agreement and the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. At national level, with the support of the United Nations and its agencies, we are incorporating the 2030 Agenda into our long-term development strategies, policies, and laws. High on our agenda are climate action and green and just transition, gender equality, and fight against discrimination against women and girls, as well as inclusion of young people in decision-making processes. 2/3 of these Sustainable Development Goals are directly related to the European legislation, and so the United Nations are helping us implement European reforms as well. For this, we are indeed grateful. I see the third pillar of the new multilateralism in a greater commitment to the reform of the United Nations, which will be substantive, not cosmetic and corrective, a reform that will unlock the potential of the United Nations and enable the voice of every state, large or small, to be equally heard and valued. The first set of reforms should help align the United Nations with the new challenges and new development priorities. The more frequent extreme weather phenomena caused by climate change are just a prelude to what kind of future awaits us and our descendants if humanity's attitude towards nature and the planet does not fundamentally change. We need a new social contract, as per Rousseau, but also a natural contract, as per Michel Serra, based on which we will treat nature as a partner. The second set of reforms would cover the structures and procedures of the United Nations, starting with the voting rules, through financing, up to the autonomy of the Secretary General. As I said, if there is a veto, there is often no justice. It is an undisputable fact that the right to a veto is legal, but the question is, how just is it? If and when it is used to paralyze processes on which the attainment of the goals of the Charter and the expectations of the people of the world depend. It is necessary for the General Assembly to be given a greater role in decision-making as a representative body of the nations in the spirit of The legitimacy of the Security Council springs from the General Assembly, so it should function as a kind of coalition government of nations. The third set of reforms would strengthen the United Nations mechanism to protect vulnerable populations and groups, which is especially important today when the number of victims and refugees is at its highest level since World War II. Respected attendees, next year, 2025, we will celebrate the 80th anniversary since the founding of the United Nations. This year is the last call. The United Nations will either become an engine that moves the world towards a more humane, a more just and sustainable order based on inclusive and accountable governance, or it will be reduced to a passive bureaucratic structure completely dependent on the main actors in the geopolitical processes and relations. Only a fundamentally reformed United Nations can bridge the gap between the legal and the just, and thus contribute to a truly transformed world in which no one will be left behind and forgotten.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of North Macedonia. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Luis Lacalle Pou, President of the Eastern Republic of Uruguay. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Buenas tardes para todos.
A very good afternoon, everyone. I would like to greet everyone here, all delegations. Today is my last speech here as President to this Assembly, and I would like to take this opportunity to greet everyone here, and in particular the delegation of Uruguay, who has worked so hard here at the United Nations. As is my last statement, I was looking over the previous statements I had delivered, and in these previous statements there was a common thread. And this is in line with how I see my vision for our country and how states relate between each other. This is the concept of freedom with responsibility, responsible freedom. I would venture to say that the first can't exist without the second. The life in society is about the development of the individual and at the same time the common good. That is what our Constitution said since our country became independent. And of course this has evolved over time with the changes in social customs. It is impossible to understand humanity without understanding the concessions that the individuals make for the common good. Essentially, we are social beings, and this ultimately impacts everyone, or at least that should be the case. And that is what inspired me as President of my country and in the spirit that I have come with to this assembly. I am convinced that globalization will only continue further, and this represents an excellent opportunity to understand ourselves better and to take advantage of the synergies that can be taken advantage of when different cultures meet. This can be the case provided that we are tolerant and respectful of those who may think differently from us. At the same time, we must also deepen the criterion of freedom and justice, in particular here at the international stage. For this to be possible, we must all make this effort as far as we are able to. The effort to make concessions, of course, that doesn't mean the loss of freedom or independence or the loss of any sovereignty. At the same time, we also need to have fair mechanisms where international law is applied to all equally, regardless of the country's size and regardless of the country's economic power. We must work together to build international law, which is credible and robust. Agreements, treaties, conventions, documents that are signed and are not implemented only leads to weakening international law. Of course, no country was obliged to participate in these organizations. That means that we can be, and we are, critical of how the organizations work in some ways. But what's the other option? It would be to isolate oneself in this interconnected world. Well, that wouldn't make any sense. So, a large part of the freedom within our countries and the international stage, and to uphold justice, a large part of this falls on those who govern and leaders. And in this modern world, where speeches lead to actions, an important leader, just with what they say, can lead to positive or negative repercussions in their country or indeed beyond. That means that we must be much more careful when we try to stimulate unity and not division within and beyond nations. Politics has meant that some leaders have used division as a tool to reach power and to stay in power. But of course, there's one thing to defend one's own beliefs or those shared by some individuals, and it's quite another thing to attack others' beliefs and others' way of life. In some countries, formal democracy in terms of elections, constitutions, and laws, such as the material, which is the material democracy that citizens experience on a daily basis. Sometimes, when that is weakened, that means that people's freedom can be affected. And I cannot ignore to mention what is happening in Venezuela. Among other things, because this isn't a new position that we are taking. Fortunately, we have always been far from this authoritarian regime, this intolerant regime, which has attacked freedom and the common good. We all know what has been going on for quite a while in that country. And many governments and many global leaders have turned a blind eye. And for a lack of interest, some of them, or unfortunately because of their interests, for some. I'm not going to go into the situation of the elections. Ultimately, one has to call out the regime and the situation of the elections, and not just the distorted electoral process. This also has to be done in terms of the political persecution that is going on and the violations of human rights and arbitrary detentions. I know that many heads of state and government have spoken about this. It seems to me that now is the time to act. We need to act for Venezuela and for the Venezuelan people. And also, if the international community tolerates these attitudes, then we'll just wait to see what the next country would be that would be subjected to a similar fate as the Venezuelans are. Another matter that I touched upon in my previous statements here pertains to the environment and the economy. What we have as a vocation in terms of caring for the environment, there's always this separation that we see between the economy and the environment. And the first time that I came to this assembly and I heard speeches from heads of state on this matter, since then I am pleased to see that there has been something of an evolution, quite a quick evolution on this matter. Now we are seeing how the economy and the environment are interlinked, and this is excellent news for humanity. Sustainable financing, for instance. My country has been a pioneer in issuing instruments such as green bonds or access to loans, where fulfilling environmental goals and caring for the environment is tied to these financial products according to performance. And this has a very important and interesting domino effect because it helps states to access financing and also to care for the environment. But also governments can then reward producers and those in industry for good behavior, for caring for the environment and for creating a clean economy. And ultimately that will lead to greater benefits in the future. I mentioned a few minutes ago the concept of justice and international law. Now, this law is applied differently in different cases. There are countries who pollute, and we see some countries who are making major efforts to try to improve their environmental situation. In order for this path to be sustainable in the medium and long term, the goals domestically should be fulfilled for each country, and at the same time, countries need to shoulder economic commitments. And in addition to just undertaking commitments, they have to fulfill them, because in the absence of this implementation, ultimately that would lead to a loss of stimulus in caring for the environment. Lastly, I just wish to mention one other point that I have also touched upon previously. And on this there hasn't been much positive change. I'm convinced that it is not possible to fully enjoy freedom in the international community if there isn't the freedom of trade, if there isn't free trade. Protectionism has hindered the development of our peoples. it has led to a vicious cycle where isolation is being stimulated and protectionism is being stimulated given these barriers that are being erected. We have to aim for a more open world for other countries' goods and services. And that does not in any way mean neglecting the domestic economy. It is possible to have open-facing policies in terms of trade and also stimulate the domestic economy. We have to build a more open world if we really believe in the equality of opportunities. The reverse case would be clear. That is to say, we would not be able to generate wealth and generate jobs, and ultimately not be able to generate prosperity if we do not do this. I wish to repeat today a concept that I mentioned in one of my previous statements to this Assembly. We are all one. I, at that point, was referring to the lessons of the pandemic. If some people hadn't noticed that at the time. Ultimately, this is an affirmation of common sense. And I think it should also be a compass for us in our daily work as we exercise power, both domestically and also in our bilateral relations and in the multilateral domain as well. Believe me, I am convinced that we will progress much more quickly and much more united if we do this. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Eastern Republic of Uruguay. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Ratu Williame Mavalili Katunavere, President of the Republic of Fiji. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
President of the United Nations General Assembly, Your Excellency Philemon Yang, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, my fellow leaders. I bring you greetings from the people of Fiji. I would also like to offer sincere congratulations to you, Mr. President, on your election to your high office, and we wish you well in the discharge of your important duties. As this is my first United Nations General Assembly, I begin by reiterating the words of the first Prime Minister of Fiji, the late Ratu Sirka Misisemara, in his inaugural address to this Assembly in 1970, and may I quote, "We do not live by bread alone, and it is only from the firm base of sound moral and spiritual standards that we can go on to meaningful economic progress. Quality should not take second place to quantity, especially when we are estimating society, its life and accepted values. Quality is measured by standards, and these standards must be observed by larger nations as well as by smaller. But it is for the United Nations to set the standards and to disseminate them widely," unquote. This statement was made when the United Nations was celebrating its 25th anniversary with the theme, Peace, Justice, and Progress. In this Assembly, 54 years later, the theme of the 79th session, Unity in Diversity for the Advancement of Peace, Sustainable Development, and Human Dignity for Everyone and Everywhere, echoes similar sentiments. It resonates with us in its importance, its relevance, from when Fiji first joined the United Nations in its urgency in today's precarious global context. Climate change, sea level rise, pandemics, poverty, unsustainable development, conflicts, inequalities, injustice everywhere. The challenges are daunting. From Gaza to Sudan, Ukraine, Afghanistan, and beyond. Conflicts rage on as humanitarian needs escalate. These are the challenges we have been fighting since time immemorial. It is the background against which the United Nations was established in 1945. Today, the rapid evolution of technology has made us more connected than ever before in history. However, the more connected we are, the wider gaps between the rich and the poor, the developed and the developing world. Small island developed states who are on the forefront lines of climate change and sea level rise continue to grapple with the impacts of climate-induced disasters with devastating consequences for the ecosystem and vulnerable communities. Fellow leaders, this year, at least 72 countries whose population combined comprises almost half the world's total population have already or will soon select their own leaders at the polls. The world is in need of courageous leaders who are willing to garner the political will and mobilize the resources to bridge the divide and seek solutions that benefit humankind. We have two choices before us: to give up and go home, or to stay the course, renew, redouble our efforts, rethink, and reform together. The choice we make will be our legacy. We choose the latter, not for ourselves, but for those coming after us. Strong international cooperation, diplomacy, and a commitment to upholding the principles of the United Nations are not only important, but dispensable. It is time to go back to the basics, the foundation and purpose of the United Nations Charter. We must invest in the empowerment of humankind and the protection of human rights. Fellow leaders, next year, the United Nations turns 80. The United Nations is only as strong as its member states. For 79 years, the global community has placed in trust in multilateralism and in the United Nations to foster cooperation, uphold human rights, and promote stability. We now live in an age of distrust, fueled by the increasing disconnect between people's expectations and inadequate responses to the multilateral system. It is our collective responsibility to counter misinformation and disinformation. Trust is a prerequisite for effective multilateralism. The continued success of multilateralism is critical. There is more to be done to ensure the voices of our countries are heard. An inclusive and responsive multilateral system must be able to respond and adapt to the challenges of today. The stakes are high for developing countries, including small island developing states and least developed countries that can continue to be left behind in the development race as we grapple with multiple crises. Despite our limited resources, the unfairness of the global governance system, and obvious inequalities, small island developing states continue to forge ahead. We do not have the luxury of time, nor can we justify inaction. Building economic resilience is a requirement for sustainable development in small island developing states. Recovery from the frequency and the magnitude of climate-related shocks, including disaster, are costly affair. Mobilizing the upfront funding needed for adaptation remains a challenge as resources are focused on recovery and reconstruction. The adoption of the multidimensional vulnerability index for small island states opens a new chapter in the ongoing effort to safeguard the future of vulnerable developing countries. Mainstreaming multidimensional vulnerability index into existing practice with policies will help ease the economic burden for small island developing states when needed the most. Fellow leaders, cultivating a culture of peace is now more urgent than ever. The Blue Pacific continent knows the value of peace, having lived through its horrors of its absence. Our oceans and its diverse and vibrant lands have been a theater of the two world wars and a testing ground for the most dangerous weapons, the impacts of which are still felt today. Yesterday, the 25th of September, there was an unilateral test firing of ballistic missile into the Pacific Ocean. We urge respect for our region and call for cessation of such action. Under Principle 4 of the Ocean of Peace, as was endorsed by the Pacific leaders in Tonga last month, our statement reinforces the Pacific's peaceful example to uphold international law and urge others to refrain from actions that undermine peace and security in the Blue Pacific. Under Principle 12, the Oceans of Peace sets and champions the rules of responsible, peaceful, and deconflicting behavior. Fiji may be a small state, but through our leadership and stewardship roles in the region, we make a profound contribution to regionalism and multilateralism. Fiji's first ever foreign policy white paper builds on three interconnecting themes of Fiji's foreign policy: sovereignty, security, and prosperity. Fiji's National Development Plan for 2025 to 2029 envisions empowering the people of Fiji through unity, based on the pillars of economic resilience, people empowerment, and good governance. True to the spirit of multilateralism, our bilateral, regional, and multilateral development partners are key part of our efforts. We commit to the principles of the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent and to the Pacific leaders' vision of a prosperous Blue Pacific continent. Fellow leaders, as a large ocean state, Fiji is a proud advocate for the United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Sea. Fiji has signed and will ratify the agreement on biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction in the lead-up to the Third Nations Oceans Conference in France. Fiji has ratified the World Trade Organization agreement on fisheries subsidies, which aims to eliminate harmful subsidies that contribute to illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. We call for a concerted effort at the World Trade Organization to finalize Part 2 of the Fisheries Subsidies Agreement that addresses subsidies to overfishing and overcapacity. Fiji reiterates the importance of understanding the vast ocean space, guided by science and data, in order to undertake risk-informed decisions. As the global community prepares for the climate COP in Baku, Azerbaijan, we call on countries to work together with the United Nations to implement the outcomes of the global stock take undertaken in COP28. Deep, rapid, and sustained reductions in greenhouse gas emissions in line with the 1.5 degrees Celsius must be vigorously pursued and accelerated. The phase-out of unweighted coal power, transitioning away from fossil fuels in energy systems, will contribute to the achievements of net zero targets by 2050. Both adaptation and mitigation finances require a substantial increase. We call on states to commit to finalizing the new collective quantified goal and address glaring gaps in climate finance. The momentum from COP27 and COP28 on the Loss and Damage Fund and the Santiago Network must be accelerated in order to protect vulnerable communities who stand to lose most from the climate crisis, particularly in small island developing states and least developed countries. By 2050, around 240 of our coastal communities will be displaced due to sea level rise. 42 communities are in urgent need of relocation. With limitation of the multilateral climate financing architecture, Fiji has established the world's first national relocation trust fund to support our relocation costs. We have issued domestic and international green and blue bonds, piloted low-cost parametric insurance products for rural communities, and engaged in the private sector in climate resilience building. We call on our development partners to support our efforts.